So here's a little something that caught my eye. Um, this is from Canadian Affairs, and they point this article here. It says square pegs and round holes. Parents of autistic kids resort to homeschooling. The limitations of Canada's public school system are driving many parents of autistic kids to homeschooling. So they state that Lindsay Castleman's two autistic children were in kindergarten and grade two when she decided it was time to homeschool her. Her youngest child, a daughter, was overstimulated by her school environment and acting at home. Her older child, a son, was diagnosed was disengaged in the classroom. The tipping point came when her son showed her a school project in which she described girls in Afghanistan as lucky because they were unable to attend school. It just hit me. There was my 8-year-old. Love of learning and curiosity is so fully and completely crushed that she has no appreciation for the gift that is learning, said Castleman, who runs Schoolio Learning Corp, an online homeschooling platform. Castleman and others say Canada's public education system often fails to meet the needs of children with special needs, such as autistic kids. Many parents of autistic kids are choosing to homeschool as a result. I think autistic kids in general are square pegs and round holes when it comes to the school system, said Castleman, who used to teach in an Ontario public school. It is a very one size fits all model, and autistic kids have a higher tendency to not fit. Cindy Gertzlach, a director of the Autism Alliance of Canada, says her advocacy organization is seeing more cases of parents choosing to homeschool. There is far more now than there was 20 years ago, and probably even 10 years ago, she said. It's clearly growing. Certainly growing. Autism, formerly called autism spectrum disorder, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects how individuals behave and interact with others. Autism is often referred to as a spectrum condition because it varies widely in its intensity and characteristics. About 1 in 50 children and youth, 130,000 minors, have been diagnosed with autism in Canada, according to 2023 public data. The public school system lacks the resources to best meet the needs of these children, says Kenneth Glazebrook, president of the Alberta Schools Council Association. The association represents the interests of parents who serve on school councils to the province's education ministry. Teachers are not trained on how to manage or educate autistic students, Glazebrook says, and public schools frequently do not have enough special education staff, individuals who are trained on how to support children with special needs. Gerlach says another problem is the public school environment is not well suited for children on the spectrum. When you walk into the classroom today, it is so visually overstimulating that impacts some of our kids, says Gerlach, who was diagnosed with autism at age 57 and is a parent to two autistic kids. Teachers may misinterpret autistic kids' behaviors as misbehavior, says Jamie McCleary, executive director of the advocacy organization Autism Canada. But often the problem is they are so overwhelmed with something that they cannot cope with their current situation, she said. McCleary was diagnosed with autism 2 years ago and has 3 autistic children. Parents who see their autistic children struggling to learn and struggling with related issues of mental health and social isolation may feel they have no choice but to pull their kids out of public school. We've really realized how many neurodivergent families are homeschooling, said Castleman. For a lot of them, it was never their intention to homeschool. School just had such a bad fit for their kids that they felt like they had no other choice. In the U.S., data from the Johns Hopkins School of Education showed 10% of autistic kids are homeschooled versus 6% of the general school population. There is a lack of comparable nationwide data on how many autistic children are homeschooled in Canada. But the total number of homeschooled kids has risen dramatically in recent years. In 2022-2023 school year, 55,000 kids across Canada were homeschooled. This number is down from a peak 83,000 in 2020, 2021 at the height of the pandemic, but is still up 43% from 2018, 2019. So that's an interesting statistic there. And I've seen a lot more people going the homeschooling route, not just with autistic kids, but just in a general consensus. Um, you know, I'm not against, I'm not against school. I'm not against education. I do see some value in an educational system. I defend, supporting education to make it better for individuals that are in those circumstances, as opposed to some people where they just say, "Oh, we need to get rid of it periodly." And I do see a lot of the missteps here. So it's hard to say because I see good in schools. I see good in homeschooling, but there's also some disadvantages with both. And I see why people more intentionally go towards homeschooling, especially when you have certain children that need certain attention that they're not getting from school. Obviously, homeschooling seems more of a suitable option because who better to understand your child than a parent? Who better to understand a child and what they need to deal with than someone that's actually raising them, not just a random teacher from a college or an institution? But also, just homeschooling has some disadvantages when it comes to, you know, being part of society. And some people have arguments against that. Some people have arguments saying that it doesn't do that. But there are some cases that homeschooling just kind of isolates people away from social opportunities, especially if you're like a single child home and you're just the only child that's being homeschooled, as compared to if you're being homeschooled by other kids, then you're able to, talk and interact and problem solve and cooperate and critical think together. So that's the thing I could take away from it. I don't know too much about the subject, but I just know there's some people that are going the homeschooling route. There are some advantages to it, but disadvantages to that. Just like there's advantages to regular school and disadvantages. Like I went through the public school system. I think overall it wasn't horrible. Like it could have been a lot worse, but it also could have been a lot better. And I think that is more in the fact that we have just deconnected ourselves from actual intentions to educate people, as we are just going the, general route of putting kids together so they're formed, so they know, the basics, essentials to throw them out to the workforce. And we don't actually educate them. And it almost kind of reminds me, there's a documentary that Michael Moore put out around 2015, and it's called Where to Invade Next. And in that documentary, they talk about education. They talk about the school system in North America compared to other places like Finland, for example, that has the top rate education of the world. And, if they are the smartest people, if they truly are the top educated people on planet Earth, I think it is our obligation to maybe look towards that and see how they're doing things differently in comparison to how we're doing differently. So Michael Moore went over to Finland to see how they were doing, and it's almost interesting in the fact that their schooling, first of all, they attend less school, which I didn't even know about that. They attend less school throughout the year. And during the school day, it's only like, I think, 2 or 3 hours compared to the 9 to 3 standard schedule of basic public school. And primarily the reason for that, if you look at the history of where schooling came from, it coincides with a standard 9 to 5 work schedule. And John D. Rockefeller, who invented basically the blueprint of basic public school setup, was the one that established that time frame so that we can train people into the workforce. And I feel like that's what a lot of these public schools are coming towards, is that we don't teach children, critical thinking skills. We don't teach our kids, it's just crazy that certain things that don't get taught in school, like, for example, how to personally budget yourself. And I know just of recently, they've included that into the curriculum in Ontario schools. Like, just recently, they added personal finance courses. They've added more budgeting courses. But a lot of schools, they don't do that. And as you're becoming more of an adult, especially in the high school years, that's critical for people. That's critical to understand that, as you're becoming an adult, you don't know how to invest your money. You don't know how to, look at real estate. You don't look at how to, grow food. You're not being taught to critically analyze media. It's just amazing that you learn trigonometry for how many years, but you don't know how to write a check. Which I know seems stupid this time of the year, because, who writes checks at this point? Everything's all e-transfer. But that happened to me. Because I didn't know how to write a check till I was almost in college. I did not know how to actually write and form a legit check to pay to someone until college. And it was just amazing that none of that ever got discussed in school, never got mentioned. So there's a lot of things that needs to be examined, that needs to be so again, I'm not against schools. I'm not saying schools need to be shut down and everyone needs to be homeschooled. I'm saying that we need to look at our education system and fix it and invest properly into it and make it so it's feasible, so we actually educate more kids more prosperously than just the general basic, run-of-the-mill system that's just deterring people from, proper education in a way.